The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
This is Voices in Validation, brought to you by IVT Network. IVT Network is your expert source for life science regulatory knowledge. Voices in Validation brings you the best in validation and compliance topics. We interview industry experts from pharma, biotech, med devices, and laboratories. Here is the host of Voices in Validation, Stacey.
Thank you, and welcome everybody to another episode of Voices in Validation. We're glad you could be with us today, and I am very excited to introduce today's guest, Felicia Ford-Rice. She is the Director, Strategic Compliance Services for PAREXEL. Thank you so much for being with us, Felicia.
Thank you for having me, Stacey.
Such a pleasure. In addition to being an expert at regulatory affairs and quality assurance, you have been super helpful at helping me stay on top of trending items and the next big thing in pharmaceuticals. So I was hoping to chat with you today about three of the biggest trending topics that we see coming up over and over again in the pharmaceutical industry. And that is data integrity, AI, and leadership. So hopefully we'll get to cover all three of those today before we run out of time. But I'm super interested to hear your perspectives on those three topics and how they're impacting prescription production or pharmaceutical production, product quality, and most importantly, patient delivery. So with that, we're going to start with data integrity, which, as everybody in the industry knows, is not a new regulatory requirement, but we continue to see it come up again and again as a hot topic, especially with several highly publicized regulatory authority inspections recently, big cases, not just in the US, but in several countries. Can you talk about the importance of data integrity in pharmaceuticals and why it remains such a hot topic or burning issue?
Absolutely, Stacey. As you said, it is a burning issue. We tend to see headlines about data integrity, and it is alarming to individuals when they see these types of charges being made about the pharmaceutical industry, because as you know, we're highly regulated and we're responsible for creating life-saving medications. But, for decades, we've had data integrity lapses occur at several companies and across multiple industries. So it's not limited to pharmaceutical product development. And when I say pharmaceutical product development, I'm inclusive of drugs, biologics, as well as medical devices.
Of course.
Many of the cases that we are familiar with tend to be linked to financial information or data privacy. And these are reported by news outlets and have been harmful to consumers. So our regulators' primary purpose for the pharmaceutical industry is to ensure that pharmaceutical products are safe and that they're effective for the patient, and that the company is manufacturing and testing their product in accordance with the laws, regulations, and standards. And they are meant to ensure that our health outcomes are not negatively impacted by decisions related to taken by these manufacturers. So product quality characteristics, including the product quality, identity, strength, and purity, they determine the safety and the effectiveness of our products. So our regulators are using this information that are gathered through years of research and development activities at these manufacturing facilities to make a decision whether this product should be on the market. And so patients also must be able to trust that our regulators are making the highest quality of decision based on the data that they receive. So it has to be of the highest level of quality. And so basically the regulators, they have to trust the industry and rely on the accuracy and the completeness of the information that the manufacturer is providing, because they're making these critical decisions. Therefore, to either approve the product for marketing and commercialization, or to say that the company either has to do additional testing and work, or that the product is not safe and is not effective. So it's not new for the FDA and other regulators, because this is a worldwide issue. It's not limited to the United States, as you all know, but they give priority to investigating any incidents that could be negatively impactful to product quality and patient safety. That is their mandate. And therefore, when they confirm there's any wrongdoing and violations of data integrity principles, it can lead to significant regulatory sanctions, including, in terms of the FDA, warning letters, consent decrees, which are court-mandated injunctions, and significant fines. And companies have even gone out of business because of data integrity issues.
Right. I mean, it's definitely a very important issue. I know, any of these pharmaceutical companies or medical device companies, for that matter, that are following good manufacturing practices know that the FDA has specific guidelines that they need to follow. And I don't think there's too many pharmaceutical companies out there who don't recognize that the FDA can come in, or any regulatory agency can come in and audit and see what's been going on. But, as consumers, they're often used to hearing about data integrity breaches with financial, as you mentioned before. But we know that data breaches can happen, and data integrity breaches can happen in the manufacturing process as well, not just in the financial piece of it. So what does it mean, what does it mean for drug makers worldwide when we are talking about data integrity as it pertains to the manufacture of either devices or product?
Right, and that's an excellent question, Stacey. Basically, what the regulators around the globe now do is they have data integrity as a routine aspect that is integrated into their inspection process. And it's not limited to manufacturing, which is a key component, but they also look at data integrity when they're evaluating laboratories under good laboratory practices, good clinical practices, as this is being tested, investigational medicinal product is being tested with patients or subjects, healthy subjects, and also good pharmacovigilance practices, which is dealing with safety. And unfortunately, the inspections continue to uncover conditions and practices that can compromise the integrity of data of pharmaceutical manufacturing operations. So when an issue is identified, whether it involves clinical, manufacturing, laboratory, or pharmacovigilance or safety data, there are multiple impacts. And this expands once it is made public. Patients could lose confidence that the products manufactured by that company are safe and effective and stop taking them. And
Right.
that could lead to negative health consequences if they're taking their medications for a significant ailment.
Right.
Healthcare providers, they may change to a competitor product that's considered to be of a higher quality and more trustworthy. And that could impact the image and reputation of the manufacturer that has been found to have data integrity lapses. Regulators could prevent the import of products. They could detain products in customs. They can seize products. They can refuse to approve products under review. All of these actions could lead to drug shortages or prevent patients from having access to life-saving medications. And these are critical treatments. Regulators may refuse to review applications. And lastly, they could also prosecute companies or individuals and invoke significant fines for these violations. So this negatively impacts the company. It could cause a devaluation of stock price. It can make it difficult to attract and retain talented personnel that are needed to conduct these scientific work required for discovering, developing, and releasing new products for treatment and cure of disease. That is what we're in business to do. And the cost of remediating data integrity is borne by the company, its management, and its personnel. It's also a stain on the pharmaceutical industry because it causes our patients to look across industry and wonder if these same types of practices are occurring. And ultimately, it impacts the patient who may not have access to a life-altering medication and treatment.
So, I mean, obviously it stands to reason then why it is still such a well talked about, highly talked about topic, and one that industry leaders are paying very close attention to.
Yeah.
And data integrity is also very closely linked to another one of our trending topics that we're talking about today. Throughout life sciences, artificial intelligence. We hear about artificial intelligence entering the pharmaceutical and med device industry daily. So as pharma adopts greater measures in automation, predictive analytics, machine learning, and personalized medicine, AI is bound to impact data integrity efforts. So can you talk a little bit about the pros and cons of automation and AI as it's coming in to pharma and how that is directly impacting data integrity efforts?
Sure. So looking at some of the pros, manufacturing is traditionally a labor-intensive activity. There are many plants that operate 24/7. That means 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in order to provide those life-saving medications and treatments to populations around the world. But as you can imagine, that's very impactful for individuals to come in and do that work for 8, 10, 12-hour shifts in order to ensure that medical supply. So AI can be introduced and has been introduced in numerous companies to increase the capacity for manufacturing by reducing the number of resources that are required to be performing very intricate scientific work. It could also introduce additional consistency in the manufacturing process because it is not person dependent.
Right.
Once a machine learns how to do a task, it is learned, and you just have to maintain the machine. Machine learning can also be used to reduce the potential for product quality defects. For example, on a manufacturing line, if you can train a piece of equipment to automatically reject a product that has a defect, whether it is a particle that might be seen, a defect in the container itself, or it could be a missing component such as a cap or closure, it would automatically reject that product, as opposed to relying on a person to visually inspect it out of the manufacturing line. Because of the automatic rejection process and some of the other machine learnings that are possible and implemented on the manufacturing line, it can accelerate the product manufacture as well as pulling the testing that needs the samples for testing, the review of the data. The data is much cleaner because the rejected product has already been removed, releasing and distributing that product. So it greatly accelerates the ability of the company to get that product on the market. Also in manufacturing, there are a bit of cons because if the AI or machine learning is set up inappropriately during its execution, it could be rejecting product that is good, so it's wasteful, or it could be rejecting product or not rejecting product that is bad or should be rejected. And that could have a negative impact on the public health. So there is still an interaction and exchange between people who are operating on the line and establishing the standards and settings for this, and also just maintaining the operation and flow of the manufacturing process if the machine fails to operate properly, to be able to identify that and correct it before it causes any issues with rejection of good product or not rejecting bad product.
So when done right, the automation process and AI is going to help the pharmaceutical industry have higher quality products, it sounds like, be more efficient in the manufacturing and distribution process, and be more safe and consistent in their delivery to the patient.
Absolutely. Well said.
Thank you. So that's all obviously on the pro side, but we still are not there every time as we see AI introduced more fully into our processes. So Felicia, help listeners understand where we are today in the journey to AI implementation, and where we need to be to have a fully integrated industry, if you will.
Okay. So that's a tall order, but I'll try and have a short synopsis.
You consult. So from your perspective, where do you see us and where, today, and where do you see us maybe 12 or 18 months or 2 years down the road, right? Where do we need to go?
Yes. So where are we today? As I said, we have automation on the line. We also have the ability of having a smart warehouse, for example. So this is where this used to be a very labor intensive and manual process where you have individuals receiving, labeling, placing products, components, active pharmaceutical ingredients and consumables in a particular storage bin, recording that either in a computerized system or a logbook, etc. And being able to retrieve and track it, you needed to have people who paid attention to detail, who were very accurate, because it's very important what you put in the space, that is being stored properly, and that it is being provided to the manufacturing area so that they can produce a life-saving medication. However, today we have companies that have invested in smart warehouses where instead of having GMP storage largely labor intensive, it is automated. And so you have a person place an order. There's a machine that reads a barcode, which is assigned randomly. And so whatever product you're looking for is anywhere in the warehouse, and a person probably would not be able to find it because it could be 5 stories high and 3 stories deep. But you have a machine that says, I know what you're asking for. It is in this barcode location. I will go and retrieve it for you. And it's called a pick list. And so you would take this pick list. The machine would retrieve whatever you requested in the quantity that you requested, deliver it to a robot cart, and then that would be sent to a manufacturing staging area where the personnel could bring it into the manufacturing facility. It's very fast, it's efficient, it ensures that your bill of materials, which you need in order to manufacture your product, is complete, and that there are no surprises when you get into the manufacturing suite. So that's where we are today. Mm-hmm. But what we're trying to get to, and where we will be in the next 18 to 24 months, is continuing to reduce the incidence of human error. A lot of what we see is human error, which causes us to create an investigation, and we have to determine the root cause, and then we have to correct it. What we're trying to do for future is be very proactive where we can automate. and to prevent introduction of error. So that would lessen the number of investigations that need to be conducted, and that helps to speed the release and approval of drugs so that they could reach the market more quickly and still have the high quality product characteristics that are required and are safe for the patient.
So what's the timing? How long do you think it's going to take us to get to that point? Is it weeks, months, years?
I think it is still years because we have new technologies coming out. Right. I know one of the advancements that we have is larger pharma, but also we're finding that smaller companies are relying more heavily on artificial intelligence to identify small molecule lead compounds. And so in the days gone by where I used to be in the laboratory, it was a very labor-intensive process.
Right.
I remember a project where we had thousands of candidates, potential candidates that we needed to screen. And now there is artificial intelligence that allows, instead of using junior level scientists who are meticulous and ensuring that there's reproducibility in their results so that you can use them to further develop the drug, there is now artificial intelligence that helps you to be more predictive as to what potential candidates are useful, and those can be moved more quickly into the development realm. But there are also some additional AI activities used by some of the larger companies. I just wanted to share just a handful. For example, AbbVie is using an AI-based patient monitoring platform in their clinical trials to ensure that there's improved adherence to the phase 2 schizophrenia trial results. So they're using AI to make sure that the patients are taking their medications as they're supposed to, and if they're not, they can intervene very quickly to make sure they're not protocol violations, and that data can be used for their application. Amgen is using machine learning to help generate novel biologic drugs. And then Bayer is using AI to automatically extract adverse event data, which is safety data, from source documents. So this helps them to have a better safety profile of their drug and to determine whether or not they need to change the formulation or change the dosage in order to assure a better patient experience and that their products are safe.
Those are three great examples of different ways that AI are being used, positive advancements. And I know there's many more examples out there. A lot of there's smart labs that we see, et cetera. So that's all points us in the right direction, especially because we all know that the pharmaceutical industry has traditionally been slow to adopt new methods and processes and even technologies because they aren't proven. And we work in an industry where everything needs to be proven for patient safety. And so to advance technologically, we also need strong leaders, I imagine, right? So leaders who are not just intelligent or good scientists, which, we know in the pharmaceutical industry they are, but who can motivate, encourage, and enlist the right people. And this takes us to our third hot topic, which is leaders or leadership. Mm-hmm. Leaders who are forward thinkers with an ability to identify shifting undercurrents and adapt quickly, surpassing challenges and altering strategic direction, boosting innovation. Those all seem to me like the kind of individuals we need in the pharmaceutical industry. Can you discuss these changing leadership roles as you're seeing them out there?
Yes, absolutely. And as you said, the industry is very slow to change. Some of that is because we are regulated. And right. So any change that we introduce has to be vetted and approved by the regulatory authority. With respect to leadership, we do need to look at not only the criteria that we are using to develop our leaders, but what our leaders' focus is. So our primary aim is to ensure that we are developing drugs or pharmaceutical products, whether they're drugs, biologics, or medical devices, that will be helpful to the patient population. We also have to ensure that we are encouraging, coaching, and mentoring those next generations of scientists who will think outside the box. We don't want new scientists developing products the same way we did 10, 20 years ago.
Right. It's not relevant anymore.
Exactly. So they need to embrace new technologies. And sometimes those technologies are a little frightening because you're not learning about them in school. These are state-of-the-art technologies, and you're reading about they're changing the world every single day. You hear about blockchain, you hear about artificial intelligence and machine learning, and you hear about robotics and automation. And many people think of them as causing the loss of jobs, but they also can help bring down the cost of drugs. As you know, that is a major issue throughout the world, is the high price of drugs. And so if we can get those drugs developed and have them on the market faster, that is meeting our purpose. So what is the leader of today doing? They are encouraging individuals across the spectrum. They are not just scientists. These are people who are technologically competent and proficient. They communicate clearly and effectively. These are individuals who can embrace differences, especially in the mindset of how you can develop a drug, and also be risk takers to ensure that you're not pursuing a sad old way of developing drugs that is not going to work for our future. For example, there was a development, I believe yesterday, there was an announcement that Argonne Labs, that's based outside of Chicago, which is not far from where I live, is testing a new computer that is from a startup company, and it is proposed to accelerate the training of algorithms for AI. So they are already looking at this brand new technology that's not really tested and proven, but they are going to be looking at it to help them to develop a drug. They specifically said for their cancer drug research, they are looking to develop a model that can predict how a tumor might respond to a drug or a combination of drugs. They're doing this through AI. And so they are then looking at this model to develop new drug candidates that could affect a specific tumor. You talked about personalized medicine,
right?
Or to predict the effects of a single drug candidate on many different types of tumors. So in the past, those would have been two separate paths taken by a pharmaceutical company. It may have taken many years to develop one path and determine whether or not they wanted to continue before they would even look at the second path. And here in Oregon, they're talking about developing both of those paths simultaneously using brand new technology. I mean, it's just really exciting and outside of the box. They're also looking to use that technology to develop a model to predict the best treatment options for traumatic brain injury. So this is something else. This company is looking at oncology and brain injury. They are not at all developed in the same way, but they're looking at this powerful tool and using this powerful tool in order to bring those programs together and be able to generate information that would help them speed the development of treatments or cures for those two treatment areas.
That is amazing that they are not only embracing the technologies, but really working quickly together to address two very important, oncology or the whole cancer industry. What do you see? I don't know if you are familiar with Argonne in terms of their leadership. I mean, obviously they are leading the way right now in terms of some AI protocols. Can you speak about their leadership team at all? I mean, why are we seeing this with Argan and not with some other companies? Is it because of the leadership, or I mean, did they just get lucky with some of the technology they have?
No, I think it is because of the leadership. They've embraced a new technology that is developed by a startup company.
Sure.
So you can imagine that you have to be somewhat of a risk taker in order to do that. You also have to have collaboration in your DNA, because you're talking about two different programs, neurology with traumatic brain injury, oncology with cancer medications, to be able to say, we see this tool not only useful for this area that we're developing, but also this one simultaneously. Let's take it forward. So great risk takers. And they are also looking at, we have to get ahead of the curve in order for us to be competitive, in order for us to serve the patients, in order for us to develop the products that we know that we're capable of and have those treatments on the market as soon as possible, and not take 20 years to screen,
Precisely.
test, and manufacture our product. So I think it's a bit of the risk taking, and also not doing something outside of the box, being unusual, taking a lesson learned from other industries. I believe it is being open to different approaches, different ideas, and being diverse in their thinking, and not feeling that they have to follow the traditional path. It is very key. I don't have insight on the particular individuals that are leading that organization, but just from reading the decisions that they're taking, this is what I'm reading into this. And it's an approach that has to be embraced more widely in the pharmaceutical industry.
I would agree. I mean, it definitely sounds like they are taking chances for the good. I mean, they're trying to advance. They're trying to make use of the best technologies that are out there and apply them in ways that are meaningful to the patient and high impact across the industry to set, some new standards, hopefully. And I think that's what we need to see in our industry leaders going forward. Is not only to continue to make these outside the box choices, but to embrace the technologies and more than embrace the technologies, to foster the technologies. I hear about some of the companies who are really partnering, as you mentioned, or collaborating closely with either startups or small labs to manufacture prototypes to test in these instances, just to see how far they can push the envelope, if you will. And I definitely think it's going to take that kind of thinking to advance us as an industry into the next industrial revolution, if you will, into the pharma 4.0 and beyond. Would you?
Yes, and I think it's and you said that very well, Stacey, I think it's a more entrepreneurial approach. Traditionally, large pharma has led the way because they have deep resources. But what we're seeing now is the engine that is driving the pharmaceutical expansion tends to be smaller companies that are developing gene therapies very quickly. And then they partner with a larger pharma in order to bring it to a wider, more diverse group of patients than they could on their own because of their development stage and their distribution networks. So a lot of collaboration, looking for innovation, people who are really passionate about what they do, and taking their learning from different industries and partnering wholeheartedly with technology and embracing it. So for some generations, it's a little frightening to look at the automation piece of it, but we have to look at it as it's contributing to our ability to be faster with life-saving medications, and also developing new areas of growth for people who are technically competent, and helping to develop whole new areas of research, learning, study, and developing brand new careers. I'm thinking in the next 5 to 10 years, there will be careers that never existed before. And it would be largely driven by these types of technologies and out of the box thinking.
I would agree. And it's only going to make the patient put the patient in a better place. We're going to start to see pharmaceuticals that are created for rare diseases much more often, right? So that they can address more specific needs of individualized patients as opposed to the large groups that we see pharmaceuticals being created for historically. So I definitely can see that it's going to advance the entire industry for the benefit of the patient as well. So in summary, as we wrap up kind of everything that we talked about today, which is a lot, and we navigate toward total adoption of safe, transparent technologies, what do you think an integrated solution looks like here, and what first steps must industry leaders take to start to move in the right direction? And still emphasizing a patient-centric mindset.
Absolutely. So, absolutely, occupations and activities that are linked to the pharmaceutical industry will be increasingly automatable. And so that means that many of our occupations will change, and a lot more people will have to work with technology on a daily basis. We already do this on a personal basis. If you think about Alexa and Siri have taken over the world, who's to know whether we will have something similar? Will we have voice activation activities in the pharmaceutical industry that will allow us to be more efficient and effective? So we're going to need highly skilled workers, and this will be impactful on the world economy. So this is something else. I mean, we do not simply sell to the American consumer, even though we're in the U.S. We're a global economy with pharmaceuticals. So we want to make sure that those products are in reach of those individuals who are outside of the U.S. as well. We do have to take into account automation potential between the countries. So in the U.S., we're considered a wealthy nation, but there are some nations that are not as wealthy. So what does automation mean for them? Will they have the skill sets? Will they have the education and learning? This is a challenge for the pharmaceutical industry, because if you do the work locally, it will be less expensive than if you're exporting talent. And so that's something we have to take into consideration, looking at the economies of these countries, wages, the size of the workforce, because some areas, the birth rate is higher than others. And then also looking at the age of the workforce, because people will age out of the workforce who are talented and have a lot of skill sets. They need to be able to pass that on to the next generation coming in. And in the pharmaceutical industry, we have the additional challenge of being highly regulated. So everything we do is under the scrutiny of a regulatory body that looks for us to ensure we are adhering to the laws and regulations, and we have a safe and effective product for all of our patients. So we have to continue to consider, to weigh the benefits and the risk of artificial intelligence, including the higher levels of output. We'll have better quality and fewer errors, and we may have equipment or processes that have capabilities to exceed what a human can actually do. But we have to be careful that it does not displace the human workforce. There still needs to be a human face to the pharmaceutical industry. So for that point, we are looking for the fact that even though our world of work is constantly evolving in the pharmaceutical industry, the needs and demands of the world's patients has not changed.
Right.
And we need to make sure that those medicines are able to get to them, and that we're using the talents and we're educating the workforce of the future, and that we're allowing risk-taking in a reasonable and measured way. But we need to have leaders to lead the way. We need the leaders to come together, to collaborate with other forms of technology that will help us do this in a compliant manner and allow us to develop the safe drugs that we need for the world's population. And we also need to make sure that the patient is taken into consideration and is also educated as to all the steps that we're taking in order to make sure our drugs are safe and effective. That is our primary role, to make sure the patients are getting a safe and effective drug. And so we can't leave them out of the equation. We have to care about them. We have to educate them. And we are the patient. So we need to make sure that we are taking care of our patients and that we are listening to their voices as well as to what they need. So we can never forget our role as leaders in the pharmaceutical industry is develop safe and effective drugs. And we should look forward to encouraging the development and implementation of new technologies that allow for novel approaches to drug development. And I think we're well on the way to doing that. We have a little bumps. We have a few bumps. We have speed bumps, but that's how we learn.
Right.
And that's how we move forward.
As any industry does, you don't learn without mistakes. And I think we are moving ahead as an industry. I think we have exciting times ahead, and I am very happy to hear of these, emerging leaders and these companies who are stepping forward and being industry leaders and helping us see the possibilities, because it seems like we have an enormous future ahead of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, as we wrap up, Felicia, one last parting word of wisdom you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Yes. Basically, the next generation is those individuals who have really grown up with technology. They're very comfortable with technology. And we really need to embrace the next generation and incorporate their ideas, their thought processes into what we are developing and planning for the future. So being a leader is not just hierarchical, saying I have this position, but it's recognizing that ideas can come from anyone, anywhere. And we have to be open to it. And we have to make sure that we're engaging those individuals who are very technically proficient, because they can move the needle so much faster. They have such comfort level with it. So this is a plug for ensuring that we have intergenerational respect and communication and appreciation in the drug development process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very, very well said. Thank you so much, Felicia, for being my guest today on the podcast, Voices in Validation. It's been great to have you. I think we have left our listeners with a lot to think about. So, yeah, I appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure.
Pleasure was all mine. Thank you to Felicia Ford-Rice, as well as my producer, Ed Sullivan, and Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. If you liked this episode, please subscribe in your podcast player of choice, and don't forget to share with your friends and colleagues. That's how more people learn about us. You can find out more by visiting ivtnetwork.com. And another great episode awaits you next week. Can't wait to see you then.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.